Ethan Caldwell stood in the center of the courtroom, adjusting his bespoke Italian tie, a smirk playing on his lips. He had just told the judge that his wife, Madeleine, was nothing but a leech who deserved to leave their marriage with 0 assets, not even the clothes on her back. He thought he had won. He thought she was just a penniless orphan he had rescued 5 years ago. He was wrong. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room swung open with a thunderous crash, silencing the room. A man in a charcoal suit walked in, radiating power that made the judge sit up straight. Ethan's face went pale. He didn't just see a stranger. He saw the CEO of the company that owned his debt. He saw his wife's brother. And he realized, too late, that he had just declared war on the wrong family. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse at 450 Kensington High Street, blurring the lights of the city below into streaky grey smudges. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than the storm raging outside. Madeleine Caldwell sat on the edge of the beige velvet sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was staring at the man she had loved for 5 years, the man she had nursed through a bankruptcy scare, the man whose ego she had polished every single morning like fine silver. Ethan Caldwell was pacing the room, holding a tumbler of scotch. He didn't look at her. He was looking at his reflection in the glass, admiring the cut of his suit. "It's simple math, Maddie," Ethan said, taking a sip. "I bring in the value. You consume it. It's an unsustainable business model. Our marriage is insolvent." Madeleine blinked. "Insolvent? We are talking about our life, Ethan. Not one of your shell companies." Ethan turned then, his eyes cold and hard. "Don't pretend you understand business, Maddie. You were a barista when I found you. A barista with student loans and a second-hand Honda. I gave you this life. I gave you the charity galas, the trips to the Hamptons, the jewelry." He gestured vaguely at her. "And now I'm bored. I need someone who matches my trajectory." The door to the study opened, and a woman walked out. She was wearing one of Ethan's dress shirts and nothing else. Jessica Vane. She was Ethan's new head of marketing, a 24-year-old with ambition that far outstripped her competence. "Is she still here, baby?" Jessica asked, leaning against the doorframe, smirking at Madeleine. "I thought you said the lawyers sent the papers over at noon." "They did," Ethan said, walking over to slip an arm around Jessica's waist. He looked back at his wife. "The prenup is ironclad, Madeleine. You get nothing if we divorce before the 10-year mark. We're at year 5. You leave with what you came with, which, if I recall, was a box of books and some cheap denim." Madeleine stood up slowly. She was trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in her veins. She looked at Jessica, then at Ethan. "You're kicking me out? Tonight? In this weather?" "I ordered you an Uber," Ethan said dismissively, checking his Rolex, a watch Madeleine had bought him for their 3rd anniversary, using her own savings. "It'll be downstairs in 10 minutes. Pack a bag. The locks get changed at midnight." Madeleine looked around the penthouse. She remembered painting the walls when they couldn't afford contractors. She remembered hosting dinner parties for his potential investors, charming them when Ethan was too abrasive, securing deals over dessert that he claimed credit for the next morning. "Ethan," she said, her voice quiet, "are you sure you want to do this? We promised, for better or worse. I stuck by you when the IRS audited you in 2022. I stuck by you when your first startup collapsed. And that was your job as a wife," he snapped. "Look, don't make this ugly. Just go. Go back to whatever trailer park or sad little apartment you belong in. You aren't cut out for this world, Maddie. You never were. You're plain. You're simple. And frankly, you're an anchor dragging me down." Jessica giggled, whispering something in Ethan's ear. He laughed. That laugh broke something inside Madeleine, but it wasn't her heart, it was her restraint. "Okay," Madeleine said. Her voice was steady now. "Okay, Ethan. I'll leave." "Good girl," he sneered. "But," she added, walking toward the hallway where her coat hung, "when you realize what you've actually thrown away, don't try to call me. The number won't work." Ethan laughed loudly, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Honey, the only reason I'd call you is if I needed someone to fetch me a coffee. Get out." Madeleine grabbed her trench coat and a single duffel bag she had kept packed in the guest closet for 3 days, ever since she found the receipt for a diamond bracelet that wasn't for her. She didn't look back. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and descended 40 floors to the lobby. The doorman, an older man named Henry, who had always been kind to her, looked at her singular bag with concern. "Mrs. Caldwell? Is everything all right? Do you need the town car?" "No, Henry," she said softly, clutching the strap of her bag. "And it's not Mrs. Caldwell anymore. It's Miss Sterling." Henry paused, his brow furrowing. "Sterling? Like the... Just Sterling, Henry. Take care of yourself." She pushed out into the rain. The Uber Ethan had graciously ordered was a beat-up sedan. She got in, the smell of stale smoke filling her nose. As the car pulled away from the life she had built, she didn't cry. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. Not the iPhone Ethan paid for, but a burner phone she had kept hidden in a hollowed-out book for 5 years. She dialed a number from memory. It rang once. "This is the private line of Alexander Sterling. Who is this?" A deep, guarded voice answered. "Alex," she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. "It's Maddie. I'm done hiding. He threw me out." There was a silence on the other end, heavy and terrifying. Then the voice returned, dropping an octave, filled with a dangerous kind of protection. "Where are you, Madeleine? I'm sending the helicopter." The following morning, Ethan Caldwell sat in his office at Caldwell Tech, feeling like the king of the world. The sun was shining, the rain had cleared, and he was a free man. "Conrad, tell me good news," Ethan barked into his speakerphone. Conrad Holloway, his attorney, had a voice like grinding gravel. He was known as the Butcher of Bay Street for his ruthlessness in divorce court. "It's in motion, Ethan. I've filed the petition citing irreconcilable differences. We've frozen the joint accounts. Not that there was much in them that wasn't yours. We've also sent a cease and desist to her last known email address to prevent her from speaking to the press. Standard procedure for a high-profile man like yourself." "Excellent." Ethan leaned back, putting his feet on the mahogany desk. "She won't talk to the press. She's too embarrassed. She has too much misplaced pride." "Has she retained counsel?" Conrad asked. "Maddie?" Ethan laughed. "With what money? I cut her cards this morning. She's probably begging for a shift at her old coffee shop right now. She'll likely get a public defender or some strip mall lawyer who specializes in traffic tickets." "Don't get cocky, Ethan," Conrad warned. "Even the mouse bites when it's cornered. Keep your nose clean with the mistress until the decree is final." "Her name is Jessica, and she's an employee," Ethan corrected, though he winked at Jessica, who was currently rearranging the books on his shelf to look more aesthetic. "Just keep it professional in public," Conrad grunted and hung up. Ethan felt a vibration in his pocket. He pulled out his phone, a notification from his bank. Alert. Automatic withdrawal of $15,000 declined. Insufficient funds in checking ending in 4590. Ethan frowned. That was the account he used for the lease on the Ferrari. He tapped the app. The balance read 0.00. "What on earth?" he muttered. He refreshed the page. Still 0. He called his accountant, a nervous man named Timothy. "Timothy, why is my personal checking empty?" "Mr. Caldwell." Timothy sounded breathless. "I was just trying to reach you. It's not just the checking. The savings, the investment portfolio linked to the household. It's all frozen." "Frozen? By who? I'm the one divorcing her." It's a compliance hold, sir, flagged by the SEC and the banking regulators regarding irregularities in spousal asset declaration. It seems someone filed a tip that you were hiding assets." "Madeline," Ethan hissed, slamming his hand on the desk. "That vindictive little—" He dialed her number. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." He threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the leather sofa. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Madeline sat at the head of a table made of black marble. She wasn't wearing the beige cardigans and jeans Ethan preferred. She was wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than Ethan's car. Her hair, usually kept in a messy bun because Ethan said it looked homely, was blown out straight and sharp. Opposite her sat Alexander Sterling, her older brother and the CEO of Sterling Global, one of the largest private equity firms in the Northern Hemisphere. "You look like yourself again," Alexander said gently, sliding a porcelain cup of tea toward her. "I don't feel like myself yet," Madeline admitted. "I feel foolish, Alex. I wanted to prove I could be loved for me. Not the Sterling name. Not the billions in the trust fund. So I became Maddie the barista. And I fell in love with a man who only loved me when he could control me." "He didn't love you, Maddie," Alexander said, his voice hardening. "He loved having a servant. I had my team run a background check on him the moment you called. Did you know his company, Caldwell Tech, is leveraged to the hilt? He's drowning in debt. He's been cooking the books to keep investors happy." Madeline's eyes widened. "He told me he was about to buy a second home in Aspen." "He can't even afford lunch in Aspen," Alexander scoffed. "He's been floating loans to pay off other loans. And here is the interesting part." Alexander tapped a file on the table. "His biggest creditor? The bank holding the note on his business loans? It's Vanguard Mutual." "I don't know them," Madeline said. "You do?" Alexander smiled, a predatory shark-like smile. "Because we bought Vanguard Mutual 3 weeks ago. Technically, Madeline, you and I own his debt." Madeline sat back, the realization washing over her. She wasn't just the wife he kicked out. She was his landlord, his bank, and his executioner. "He treated me like I was nothing," she whispered, remembering the look on Jessica's face. "So," Alexander stood up, walking to the window, "what do you want to do? We can crush him from here. Call in the loans, bankrupt the company, leave him destitute by Tuesday. It would be easy." Madeline stood up and walked to stand beside her brother. She looked out at the city. She thought about the 5 years of cooking, cleaning, apologizing, and shrinking herself to fit into Ethan's small, fragile ego. She thought about the way he threw her bag into the rain. "No," Madeline said. "Bankruptcy is too fast. He needs to be humiliated. He needs to stand in a courtroom and tell the world I'm worthless, and then watch as the world realizes he is the fraud. I want to see his face, Alex. I want to see it when he realizes who I really am." Alexander turned to her, his eyes gleaming with approval. "I've already hired the best litigation team in the state, but if you want theater, Maddie, we can give you theater. The hearing is set for Friday. Do you want to attend?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said. "But I need a disguise, not a physical one. I need him to think I'm defeated until the very last second." "Then let's get to work," Alexander said. "We have a performance to prepare for." Back in the city, Ethan was screaming at his secretary. The freeze on his accounts was annoying, but he was sure his lawyer could fix it. He was focused on the hearing. He wanted to destroy Madeleine. "Get me the file on the beach house," Ethan yelled. "I want to prove she never contributed a dime to the renovations. I want the judge to see she was dead weight." Jessica walked in, looking worried. "Ethan, there's a rumor online. Someone posted on the company forum." "What rumor?" "That Caldwell Tech is being audited by a major firm. Our stock dropped 4% in the last hour." "It's just noise," Ethan dismissed her. "It's probably Madeleine's loser friends trying to scare me. Ignore it. Focus on Friday. Friday is when I cut the dead weight loose and we officially start our empire." He had no idea that the dead weight was currently deciding whether or not to foreclose on his entire existence. The stage was set for Friday, and Ethan Caldwell was walking into a massacre armed with nothing but arrogance. 3 days before the hearing, the atmosphere in the city was stiflingly humid, a sharp contrast to the cold rain of the eviction night. Ethan Caldwell was currently screaming at a valet outside Le Bernardin. "What do you mean, declined?" Ethan spat, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "Run it again. It's a platinum Amex. It doesn't decline." The young valet, looking terrified, held the card reader out. "Sir, it says, issuer restricted. Do you have another card?" Jessica, standing behind Ethan in a dress that was slightly too short for a business lunch, sighed loudly. She checked her nails. "Ethan, this is embarrassing. People are looking. Just use the company card." Ethan gritted his teeth. He knew he wasn't supposed to use the Caldwell Tech corporate card for personal expenses, especially not with an audit looming. But he had no choice. He snatched the corporate card from his wallet and swiped it. It went through. He breathed a sigh of relief, but the knot of anxiety in his stomach tightened. He had been living on a knife's edge for 72 hours. Every personal account was frozen. His accountant, Timothy, had stopped answering his calls. The only person answering him was Conrad Holloway, his shark of a lawyer, who assured him that this financial freeze was a temporary, administrative error caused by the divorce filing. "It's a tactic, Ethan," Conrad had told him over a breakfast of scotch and cigars. "She's got some bottom-feeder lawyer trying to freeze assets to force a settlement. We go to court on Friday, we crush her, the judge unfreezes the assets, and you walk away clean. Just hold it together until Friday." Ethan clung to that promise. He needed a win. He needed to see Madeleine broken so he could feel powerful again. Across town, in the library of the Sterling estate, a mansion hidden behind high iron gates in Greenwich, Madeleine was far from broken. She was studying. The library was a 2-story room filled with rare first editions and the smell of old paper and beeswax. Madeleine sat at a massive oak desk surrounded by binders. Alexander stood by the fireplace, reading a report on a tablet. "We have the forensic accounting back on Caldwell Tech," Alexander said without looking up. "It's worse than we thought, Maddie. He's not just bad with money, he's criminal. He's been moving investor funds into offshore accounts to pay for his lifestyle. The Ferrari, the penthouse, the jewelry he bought, that mistress. It was all paid for with stolen money." Madeleine ran her hand over a ledger. "He always told me I was the spender. He made me track every grocery bill. If I spent more than $100 on food for the week, he would lecture me on fiscal responsibility." "Projection," Alexander said, turning to face her. "Narcissists always project their own failures onto their victims. But here is the question. Do we use this evidence now?" Madeleine looked at the files. It was enough to send Ethan to federal prison for 20 years. It was the nuclear option. "No," she said firmly. "Not yet. If we arrest him now, the divorce gets delayed. He becomes a victim of the system. I want the divorce finalized first." I want him to stand in front of a judge and swear on the record that he is a successful genius and I am a burden. I want his arrogance to be recorded in the court transcript. Then we drop the hammer." Alexander smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile that mirrored her own. "You really are a sterling. I was worried 5 years with that man had softened you." "It didn't soften me," Madeline said, closing the binder with a sharp snap. "It compressed me, and compressed carbon turns into diamond." Just then, the double doors opened. A tall woman with silver hair and glasses sharp enough to cut glass walked in. This was Eleanor Vance, no relation to the forbidden name, but everyone called her the Viper. She was the lead counsel for Sterling Global, a woman who had once made a senator cry during a deposition. "The pre-trial motion is set for this afternoon," Eleanor said, her voice crisp. "Ethan's lawyer, Holloway, has requested an emergency meeting. They want to offer a settlement." "A settlement?" Madeline raised an eyebrow. "They want you to sign a waiver," Eleanor explained. "In exchange for a one-time payment of $10,000, you agree to waive all rights to future spousal support and admit that you made no contribution to the marriage assets. They want to buy you off cheap before Friday." $10,000, Madeline repeated, the insult landing softly. "He thinks that's what 5 years of my life is worth." "He thinks you're starving," Alexander reminded her. "He thinks you're desperate." "Let's go to the meeting," Madeline said, standing up. "But I'm not going as Madeline Sterling, heiress to the empire. I'm going as Maddie the broke ex-wife." "Go change," Alexander nodded. "Wear the oldest thing you have." 2 hours later, Madeline walked into the conference room of Holloway's law firm. The office was designed to intimidate. Glass walls, black leather chairs, and a view of the city that screamed money. Ethan sat at the head of the table, flanked by Conrad Holloway and, inexplicably, Jessica. When Madeline entered, she was wearing a faded grey cardigan, jeans that were fraying at the hem, and no makeup. She looked tired. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Ethan sneered, spinning a pen in his fingers. "You look terrible, Maddie. Rough couple of nights on the street?" "I'm staying at a motel," Madeline lied softly, her voice trembling just the right amount. She sat down, clutching her purse tight. Next to her sat a man named Mr. Henderson, a junior associate from Eleanor's firm, whom they had brought along to play the role of an incompetent public defender. "Let's cut to the chase," Conrad Holloway barked. He slid a piece of paper across the table. "Ethan is a generous man. Too generous, if you ask me. He is willing to give you a check for $10,000, enough to get an apartment, maybe some new clothes. In exchange, you sign this. It says you walk away. No alimony, no claim on the business, no claim on the penthouse." Madeline looked at the paper. She saw the clauses. The undersigned admits to willful unemployment. The undersigned admits to financial negligence. "Ethan," she looked up, meeting his eyes. "You really want me to sign this? To say I did nothing?" "You did nothing," Ethan laughed, looking at Jessica for validation. "You cooked some pasta and did laundry. I built an empire. Sign the paper, Maddie. Take the money. Or I swear to God, on Friday, I will destroy you in court. I will sue you for emotional distress. I will make sure you end up owing me money." Jessica giggled. "You should take it, sweetie. You look like you need a meal." Madeleine looked at Jessica. She saw the diamond bracelet on her wrist, the one Ethan had bought with the company credit card last week. "I can't sign this," Madeleine whispered. "Then we see you in court." Conrad slammed his hand on the table. "And bring a better lawyer than this stiff," he gestured to Mr. Henderson, "because I'm going to eat you alive." Ethan stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked over to Madeline and leaned down, whispering in her ear. "You were always a disappointment, Maddie. Friday is just the formality." He walked out, Jessica trailing behind him. Madeline sat there for a moment. Then she slowly lifted her head. The trembling stopped. The fear vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. "Mr. Henderson," she said to the young lawyer, "did the recording device in my purse capture all of that?" "Crystal clear, Miss Sterling," Henderson replied, grinning. He admitted to coercion and verified he considers the business solely his, which will be useful when we seize it. "Good," Madeline stood up, smoothing down her fraying cardigan. "Let's go home. I need a shower. I feel dirty just being in the same room as him." Friday morning arrived with a vengeance. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that hadn't quite broken yet. The Superior Court of New York was a formidable building, all stone pillars and echoing hallways designed to make humans feel small. Courtroom 304 was packed. Divorce cases didn't usually draw a crowd, but Ethan Caldwell was a minor celebrity in the tech world, and he had leaked to a few tech blogs that he was finally shedding the dead weight to take his company public. Reporters sat in the back row, notebooks ready. Ethan arrived 20 minutes early, wearing a Navy bespoke suit that cost $5,000. He looked every inch the successful CEO. Conrad Holloway was beside him, looking like a bulldog ready to snap a chain. Jessica sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing sunglasses indoors, trying to look like a tragic heroine supporting her man. "She's late," Ethan muttered, checking his watch. Maybe she fled the state. "She'll be here," Conrad said, arranging his files. "She's too stupid to run." At 8:58 a.m., the heavy oak doors opened. Madeleine walked in. She was not wearing the grey cardigan, but she also wasn't wearing the power suit she had worn in her brother's office. She was dressed simply in a black dress, modest and unpretentious. She walked with her head held high, but her eyes were downcast. She walked to the defendant's table and sat down alone. "Where is her lawyer?" Ethan whispered loudly, causing a few people to titter. "Did he quit?" Conrad smirked. "Probably didn't get his retainer. Looks like she's representing herself. This is going to be a slaughter." "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Harrison entered. He was an older man with a reputation for zero tolerance for theatrics. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the docket. "Case 4902, Caldwell versus Caldwell," the judge read. "Parties are present. Mr. Holloway, you represent the plaintiff, Mr. Caldwell." "I do, Your Honor." Conrad stood up, booming voice filling the room. "And Mrs. Caldwell." The judge looked at Madeline, sitting alone at the large table. "Are you unrepresented?" Madeline stood up slowly. "Your Honor, my counsel is delayed, but they will be here shortly. I am prepared to proceed with opening statements, if the court allows." "Very well," the judge nodded, checking the clock. "Mr. Holloway, you may begin." Conrad Holloway didn't walk. He prowled. He moved to the center of the room, buttoning his jacket, and turned to look at Madeline with pure disdain. "Your Honor," Conrad began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We are here today to dissolve a marriage that was, frankly, a fraud. My client, Ethan Caldwell, is a visionary, a builder, a man who contributes to the economy. The defendant, Madeleine Caldwell, is a parasite." A gasp went through the room. The judge frowned but didn't interrupt. "We will prove," Conrad continued, pacing back and forth, "that throughout their 5-year marriage, Mrs. Caldwell contributed 0 income, 0 assets. She lived in the lap of luxury provided solely by my client. She spent his money, lived in his penthouse, and now, fueled by greed, she refuses to leave without a payout. She is a gold digger, plain and simple, who trapped a successful man and is now trying to cash out. Conrad paused for effect, pointing a finger at Madeline. We are asking the court to enforce the prenuptial agreement strictly. Mrs. Caldwell leaves with nothing. No alimony. No division of property. And, Your Honor, we are countersuing for legal fees because Mr. Caldwell should not have to pay to remove a squatter from his life. Ethan sat back in his chair, a smug grin plastered on his face. He caught Madeline's eye and mouthed the word, "Bye." Mrs. Caldwell? The judge turned to her. Do you have an opening statement? Madeline stood up. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she steadied them against the table. Your Honor, she said, her voice soft but clear. Mr. Caldwell calls me a parasite. He says I contributed nothing. I intend to prove that not only did I contribute to the marriage, but that without me, Mr. Caldwell would be destitute. I intend to prove that the assets he claims are his are actually liabilities, and that the empire he speaks of is built on a foundation of lies. Objection! Conrad shouted. Slander! She has no proof. Overruled, the judge said, looking interested. It's an opening statement. Sit down, Mr. Halloway. The trial began in earnest. Conrad called Ethan to the stand. Ethan performed beautifully. He cried fake tears when talking about how hard he worked. He presented spreadsheets, carefully doctored, showing his income versus her spending. He painted a picture of a saintly husband dealing with a lazy, ungrateful wife. She would just sit at home, Ethan told the court, shaking his head. I'd come home from an 18-hour day, and she would complain that I didn't spend enough time with her. I tried to buy her affection, cars, clothes. Nothing was enough. And did she ever offer to get a job? Conrad asked. Never, Ethan sighed. She said working was beneath her. Madeline sat silently, taking notes. She didn't object. She didn't interrupt. She let him weave his web of lies until he was comfortable. Your witness, Conrad said, sneering at Madeline. Madeline stood up to cross-examine her husband. She didn't have a notepad. She just looked at him. Mr. Caldwell, she said, you stated that you paid for the penthouse at 450 Kensington High Street entirely with your own earnings from Caldwell Tech in 2023. Is that correct? Absolutely, Ethan said confidently. And you stated that you own the patent for the Caldwell algorithm, which is the basis of your company's value? I wrote that code myself, Ethan lied. And, Madeline paused, you stated that I brought nothing into this marriage but debt. You had $40,000 in student loans and a Honda Civic. Ethan laughed. Everyone knows that. No further questions, Madeline said, sitting down. The courtroom murmured. That was it? She wasn't going to fight back? Is that all? The judge looked confused. Mrs. Caldwell, you aren't going to challenge his claims? Not personally, Your Honor, Madeline said. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 10 a.m. exactly. My counsel has just arrived to handle the rebuttal. This is ridiculous, Conrad stood up. Your Honor, she's stalling. There is no counsel. I move for a summary judgment immediately. Sit down, Mr. Halloway, the judge barked. He looked at the back of the room. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom groaned. They didn't just open. They were pushed open with force. The sound of confident, heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Ethan turned around, annoyed. Who the hell is... His voice died in his throat. Walking down the center aisle was a phalanx of 5 lawyers in matching charcoal suits. They moved in a V formation, like a flock of predatory birds. But it was the man at the front of the V who made the air leave the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that looked like shattered ice. He wore a suit that cost more than Ethan's entire company. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the gallery. He looked straight at Ethan. Ethan recognized him. Everyone in the business world recognized him. He had been on the cover of Forbes last month. It was Alexander Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Global, the man known as the Kingmaker. And behind him, flanking him like bodyguards, were the top litigators from Sterling, Vance and Associates. The courtroom fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. Even the judge looked surprised, adjusting his glasses to make sure he was seeing correctly. Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Why is Alexander Sterling here? He wondered. Did he buy the courthouse? Alexander walked straight to the defense table. He didn't sit down. He stood next to Madeline, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. He looked at Ethan, and for the first time, Ethan saw the family resemblance. The same nose, the same eyes. Alexander turned to the judge. His voice was deep, resonant, and filled with absolute authority. Your Honor, Alexander Sterling, appearing on behalf of the defendant. Mr. Sterling? The judge raised an eyebrow. You are representing Mrs. Caldwell? No, Your Honor, Alexander corrected him, a small, terrifying smile playing on his lips. I am representing Ms. Madeline Sterling. He paused, letting the name hang in the air like a guillotine blade. My sister. Ethan felt his heart stop. He gripped the edge of the witness stand so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at Madeline, the quiet, mousy girl he had bullied for 5 years. Madeline Sterling? Alexander reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick red file. He dropped it on the table with a heavy thud that echoed like a gunshot. And we are not here just to defend against these absurd divorce claims, Alexander continued, his eyes locking onto Ethan's terrified face. We are here to file a motion for immediate freezing of all assets belonging to Mr. Caldwell, pending a federal investigation into embezzlement, fraud, and the theft of intellectual property belonging to the Sterling Trust. Alexander leaned forward, his voice dropping to a growl that only the front row could hear. You wanted a war, Ethan? You just invaded Russia in the winter. The silence in courtroom 304 was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for the moment after a bomb goes off, where the dust hangs in the air and the ringing in the ears is the only sound. Sterling? Judge Harrison repeated, peering over his spectacles at the woman he had assumed was a destitute housewife. He looked at the file on his desk, then back at Alexander. Mr. Sterling, are you asserting that the defendant, listed here as Madeline Caldwell, is a member of the Sterling family? The Sterling family? I am, Your Honor, Alexander said, his voice smooth as silk but hard as iron. He stepped aside, allowing Madeline to stand. She was born Madeline Elizabeth Sterling. She removed herself from the family trust 5 years ago to pursue a life of independence. A life, unfortunately, that was exploited by the plaintiff. Ethan sat frozen in the witness box. His brain was misfiring. Sterling. The name bounced around his skull. If she was a Sterling, she wasn't broke. She wasn't a nobody. She was royalty. And that meant... He looked at Alexander. He looked at the team of 5 lawyers behind him. He realized with a sickening lurch that he wasn't fighting a traffic ticket. He was fighting a corporate superpower. Objection! Conrad Holloway shouted, though his voice cracked slightly. He was sweating. He knew exactly who Alexander Sterling was. He also knew that Sterling's legal team, led by Eleanor Vance, had a reputation for bankrupting opposing counsel. Relevance. Who her family is doesn't change the facts of the marriage. She still contributed nothing. She still... Actually, Mr. Holloway, Alexander interrupted, walking toward the witness stand with the red file in his hand. It changes everything. Because you claimed my sister was a financial burden. You claimed she was a parasite. Alexander slammed the file onto the ledge of the witness stand, right in front of Ethan. Open it, Mr. Caldwell. Ethan's hands shook as he opened the folder. Inside were bank statements. Not his. Madeline's. Read the highlighted figure on page 3, Alexander commanded. Ethan stared at the paper. It was a statement from a blind trust. The balance was staggering. There were more zeros than he had ever seen in his own accounts. 40 million, Ethan whispered. $40 million in liquid assets. Alexander corrected him loudly for the court record. And that is just the quarterly dividend. You see, Ethan, my sister didn't need your money. She didn't need your penthouse. She paid the utility bills you forgot to pay 3 times last year. She paid off your credit card debt in 2022 when you maxed it out on gambling in Vegas. She did it anonymously, through a shell corporation, to protect your fragile ego. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The reporters in the back were typing furiously. Tech CEO supported by secret heiress wife. It was the headline of the year. Order! Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Mr. Sterling, get to the point. The point, Your Honor, Alexander said, turning to the judge, is that Mr. Caldwell has committed perjury. He stated under oath that he is the sole provider. That is a lie. But that is the least of his crimes. Alexander turned back to Ethan. Let's talk about Caldwell Tech, shall we? You told the court you wrote the Caldwell algorithm yourself, the code that predicts market trends. I did, Ethan stammered, trying to regain his footing. It's my code. I spent nights. Funny, Alexander said, pulling a second document from his briefcase. Because this is an affidavit from a software engineer named Dr. Aris Thorne. He works for Nebula Systems. Ethan went pale. Nebula Systems was where he had interned 6 years ago. Dr. Thorne claims that the source code for your algorithm is identical, line for line, to a proprietary trading bot stolen from Nebula Systems in 2019. He has provided the digital footprint proving the theft. Alexander leaned in close, his face inches from Ethan's. And do you know who owns Nebula Systems, Ethan? Ethan couldn't speak. His mouth was dry as sand. I do, Alexander whispered. Sterling Global acquired them last year, which means you didn't just steal code, you stole from us. This is an ambush, Conrad Holloway yelled, standing up. My client asserts his Fifth Amendment rights. We are leaving. Sit down, Mr. Holloway, Judge Harrison roared. Nobody is leaving this courtroom until I say so. The judge looked at Ethan with eyes full of disgust. Mr. Caldwell, is it true? Is your company based on stolen intellectual property? I improved it, Ethan squeaked. It wasn't... I changed the interface. He just admitted to copyright infringement on the record. Eleanor Vance spoke up from the defense table for the first time, her voice dry and bored. We'll be adding that to the civil suit. Ethan looked out into the gallery, desperate for an ally. He found Jessica. Jessica Vane was staring at him with wide, horrified eyes. She wasn't looking at him with love anymore. She was looking at him like he was a burning building she needed to escape. She slowly grabbed her purse. She stood up, keeping her head down, and began to shuffle toward the exit. Ms. Vane! Alexander Sterling's voice boomed out without him even turning around. I wouldn't leave just yet. The subpoenas for your personal accounts are being served as we speak. We know about the funds Ethan transferred to you. Federal law calls that receipt of stolen goods. Jessica froze in the aisle. She burst into tears, sinking back onto the bench. Ethan, Madeline spoke up. She hadn't moved from her seat. She looked calm, almost sad. Stop lying, it's over. Ethan looked at his wife, the woman he had kicked out into the rain, the woman he had called simple. You played me, he hissed, his face twisting into a snarl. You lied to me for 5 years. You pretended to be poor. You tricked me." "I didn't trick you," Madeleine said softly. "I wanted to know if you could love me without the money. I wanted to build a life with you, brick by brick. I didn't hide the money to hurt you, Ethan. I hid it to see if you were real." She stood up and walked to the railing of the witness box. "And you proved exactly who you are. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a fan. You wanted a servant. And the moment you thought I had nothing left to give, you threw me away." "I made you!" Ethan screamed, losing all control. He stood up in the witness box, his face purple. "I gave you a name. Nobody knew who you were. I am Ethan Caldwell. I am the visionary." "You," Alexander said, cutting him off with a voice like a judge's sentence, "are a fraud. And as of this morning, Caldwell Tech has been seized by your creditors, specifically by Vanguard Mutual, which, as I mentioned, is me." Alexander looked at the judge. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss the plaintiff's petition for divorce settlement on the grounds of fraudulent financial disclosure. We also request that Mr. Caldwell be remanded into custody pending the federal indictment for wire fraud and corporate espionage. The FBI is waiting in the hallway." Ethan's knees gave out. He slumped back into the chair, gasping for air. Judge Harrison looked at the terrified man, then at the stoic woman standing before him. "Motion granted," the judge said, slamming the gavel. "Bailiff, take Mr. Caldwell into custody. Court is adjourned." The chaos that followed the bang of the gavel was immediate. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions. The bailiff, a burly man who had clearly been waiting for this moment, stepped into the witness box and pulled Ethan to his feet. "Hands behind your back," the bailiff grunted. "You can't do this," Ethan shouted, struggling as the handcuffs clicked. The cold metal against his wrists felt impossible. He was a CEO. He wore Italian suits. Handcuffs were for poor people. Handcuffs were for people like, well, people like he thought Madeleine was. "Conrad, do something!" Ethan screamed at his lawyer. Conrad Holloway was already packing his briefcase. He didn't look up. "I can't represent you in a criminal federal case, Ethan. That's outside my retainer. And considering your assets are frozen, I doubt you can afford my hourly rate for the appeal. Good luck." Conrad walked out, leaving his client alone. As Ethan was dragged down the center aisle, he passed Madeleine. She was standing next to her brother. She looked immaculate, powerful. The plainness he had despised was gone, replaced by an aura of untouchable grace. "Maddie!" Ethan pleaded, stopping the bailiff by sheer force of will. "Maddie, please! Tell them to stop! I'm your husband! We can work this out! I'm sorry about Jessica. It was a mistake! A moment of weakness! I love you!" The gallery went silent, watching the desperate man beg. Madeleine looked at him. She didn't look angry. She looked at him with the same expression one might use when looking at a dead insect on a windowsill. Pity, mixed with a desire to have it removed. "You don't love me, Ethan," she said quietly. "You love the lifestyle you thought you deserved. You love the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes when I looked up to you." She took a step closer, close enough that he could smell the expensive perfume she had never worn around him because he said it was too strong. "I tried to save you from yourself so many times," she whispered. "I covered your mistakes. I soothed your temper. I made you feel big when you felt small. But you mistook my kindness for weakness. And that was your fatal error. Maddie, please!" Tears were streaming down his face now, ruining the $5,000 suit. "I have nothing. If you let them take me, I have nothing." "You have exactly what you told me to leave with," she said coldly. "Nothing." She nodded to the bailiff. "Get him out of here." The bailiff shoved Ethan forward. As he was pushed through the double doors, the flashing lights of the press cameras blinded him. He was front-page news, but not in the way he had dreamed. Back in the courtroom, the air seemed to lighten. Jessica Vane was still sitting on the bench, sobbing into her hands. She looked up as Madeleine approached. "Mrs. Caldwell," Jessica choked out. "I didn't know. He told me you were awful, he told me." "Stand up," Madeleine said. It wasn't a request. Jessica stood, trembling. "You are young," Madeleine said, looking her over. "And you are stupid. But you aren't the villain here. You're just another prop in his stage play." Madeleine reached into her purse, a Hermes bag that had been brought in by her team, and pulled out a business card. "This is the number for a recruitment agency my foundation runs. They help women get back on their feet after bad situations. Go there. Get a real job. Learn a skill that doesn't involve sleeping with your boss." Jessica took the card, her hands shaking. "Why? After what I did?" "Because," Madeleine said, turning away, "I'm not him. I don't destroy people just because I can." Madeleine walked back to Alexander. He was smiling, a genuine, warm smile. "That was remarkably merciful," Alexander said. "I would have crushed her." "She's insignificant," Madeleine said, smoothing her dress. "Ethan was the disease. She was just a symptom." They walked out of the courthouse together. The rain from the previous days had vanished completely. The sun was blazing down on the New York streets. A sleek, black limousine was waiting at the curb, flanked by 2 security SUVs. A driver held the door open. "Where to, Ms. Sterling?" the driver asked. Madeleine paused. She looked back at the courthouse. She thought about the small apartment she had shared with Ethan in the beginning. She thought about the coffee shop where they met. She thought about the woman she had tried to be. "Take me to the airstrip," she said. "I think it's time I went home to the estate." And then, "I have a board meeting to attend on Monday. I believe Caldwell Tech needs a new interim CEO to manage the liquidation." Alexander laughed as he got in beside her. "You're going to run his company?" "I'm going to strip it for parts," Madeleine said, as the door closed, sealing them in the quiet luxury of the car. "He always said I didn't understand business. I think I'll turn his office into a daycare center for the employees." He would have hated that. As the limousine pulled away, merging into the traffic, Madeleine Sterling took a deep breath. For 5 years, she had held her breath, waiting to be loved. Now she exhaled. She picked up her phone. She dialed the number for the real estate agent in charge of the penthouse at 450 Kensington High Street. "Hello," she said. "This is Madeleine Sterling. I'm the new owner of the note on the property." "Yes. I'd like the locks changed immediately. And please, donate everything inside to the Salvation Army, especially the suits." She hung up and looked out the window. The city looked different now. It didn't look like a place to survive. It looked like a playground. And for the first time in a long time, Madeleine was ready to play. 6 months had passed since the doors of the courtroom slammed shut on Ethan Caldwell's life. The summer heat of New York had faded into a crisp, golden autumn. In the maximum security wing of the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, the air always smelled of bleach and despair. Ethan sat on the edge of a thin mattress. He was no longer wearing Italian wool. He was wearing an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit that scratched his skin. His hair, once perfectly styled with $40 gel, was now grown out and greasy. He held a plastic tray with a spoon. There were no steak dinners here, no scotch, just a lukewarm mystery stew. "Caldwell," a guard shouted, banging a baton against the bars. "Mail call." A single envelope slid across the concrete floor. Ethan scrambled for it. His heart pounded. He had written to Madeleine every week, begging, apologizing, bargaining. He told her he had changed. He told her he had found religion. He told her he knew where hidden accounts were. A lie, she had already found them all. He tore open the envelope. It wasn't a letter from Madeline. It was a glossy brochure. On the cover was a picture of the building, formerly known as Caldwell Tech Headquarters, the sleek glass skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. But the sign didn't say Caldwell anymore. It read, "The Sterling Initiative, a center for financial literacy and women's advocacy." Ethan's hands shook as he opened the brochure. There was a photo of the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Madeline was front and center, holding oversized scissors. She looked radiant, wearing a white coat, laughing at something a senator was saying. Beside her stood Alexander, looking proud. Underneath the photo was a caption. "Madeline Sterling, founder, dedicates the new center to all those who have been underestimated. The facility, formerly the site of a fraudulent tech firm, will now offer free legal and financial aid to victims of domestic financial abuse." Ethan crumbled the paper in his fist. She hadn't just taken his company. She had turned his monument to himself into a charity for the very people he despised. She had erased his legacy completely. He looked at the wall of his cell. He had nothing. Just like she said. The silence of the prison was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own sobbing. Across the city, the atmosphere was very different. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was bathed in the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. It was the annual Sterling Autumn Gala, an event where the entry ticket cost more than most people's cars. Madeline moved through the crowd with a grace that silenced her critics. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk, her back straight, her smile genuine. She wasn't the mouse anymore. She was the lioness. "You've created quite a stir," Alexander said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "I heard the auction of Ethan's personal effects raised nearly $300,000. It did. Madeline took the glass, her eyes twinkling. His Ferrari went to a collector in Dubai. His watch collection, well, that was interesting. Oh? Alexander raised an eyebrow. Who bought the Patek Philippe? The one he claimed was one of a kind? I did, Madeline admitted. Sentimental? Alexander teased. Hardly. She laughed softly. I gave it to Henry. Henry? The doorman at your old building? Yes. The one who was kind to me the night Ethan kicked me out. Ethan used to yell at him for not opening the door fast enough. I thought it was poetic justice that Henry now wears a watch worth more than Ethan's bail. Alexander chuckled, a rich, deep sound. You are terrifying, Maddie. I love it. They walked out onto the terrace overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled below them, a sea of diamonds. Do you ever miss it? Alexander asked, his voice turning serious. The anonymity? Being just Maddie? Madeline looked out at the skyline. She thought about the simple joy of coffee in the morning, the quiet evenings reading. I don't miss the blindness, Alex, she said. I liked being simple, but I hated being weak. I realized that money doesn't make you happy, but it gives you a voice. Ethan used his voice to scream at people. I'm using mine to listen. She turned to face her brother. By the way, I received a letter from the prison warden today. Regarding? Ethan's visitation rights. He wants to see me. He says he needs closure. I can have the lawyers block it, Alexander said instantly, his protective instinct flaring. You don't have to breathe the same air as him ever again. I know, Madeline smiled. That's why I already sent the reply. What did you say? Madeline took a sip of champagne, the bubbles crisp and cold. I sent him a copy of the divorce decree, highlighted the section where my name is restored to Sterling, and attached a note. And the note? Madeleine looked up at the moon, feeling lighter than she had in years. I wrote, "The wife you are looking for no longer exists. She was evicted. The woman who remains is busy running the world." Alexander clinked his glass against hers. "To the woman who remains." "To the future," Madeleine replied. She turned back to the party, to the music, to the life that was finally, truly hers. She had walked through the fire of a narcissist's rage and come out not as ash, but as solid gold. Ethan Caldwell was a memory, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. But Madeleine Sterling, she was just getting started. And that is the story of how one man's arrogance became his own prison. Ethan Caldwell thought he held all the cards. He thought that money and status gave him the right to treat people like disposable objects. He made the fatal mistake that so many bullies make. He confused kindness with weakness. He didn't realize that the woman folding his laundry and soothing his ego was actually a sleeping giant. It's a powerful reminder to never let anyone determine your worth. Madeleine didn't need Ethan's money to be valuable. She had her own power all along. She just needed the courage to use it. In the end, Ethan was left with exactly what he gave. Nothing. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And I want to know from you, what would you have done if you were Madeleine? Would you have visited him in prison, or did she do the right thing by ignoring him? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.